Today we're going to talk about Fox News and some high-profile Republicans miraculously deciding to soften their tones on the COVID vaccine and why. And I interview Congressman Eric Swalwell about the GOP's rejection of the January 6th committee and his response to Kevin McCarthy, who opposed this committee while having bragged about the Benghazi Select Committee because it hurt Hillary Clinton. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're listening to No Lie. In an almost unfathomable turn of events, some high-profile Republicans gave the country whiplash this past week when they started promoting vaccines. And look, I'm no brilliant political strategist, but I'm assuming, and just stay with me on this one, that Republicans having convinced their supporters not to get a free, life-saving vaccine during a pandemic where people dying are almost exclusively the unvaccinated isn't turning out to be a great long-term strategy. Turns out that condemning the people who listen to you to die at a rate of 99-1 might not be the move after all. And of course, they're not going to admit that. So the line that they're going with is that the Delta variant is just too dangerous to ignore. Right, the 600,000 people who died from the initial strain of COVID weren't enough to raise eyebrows over at Fox, but the Delta variant is finally a strain serious enough that conservatives would deign to pay attention. Again, this has little, if anything, to do with the specific mutation and everything to do with the fact that they've managed to single out their viewers who are now virtually the only ones dying from this virus. And so realizing the absolute dumpster fire that they'd created because they decided to turn a public health issue into a culture war issue, some genius, no doubt, decided that in fact they should promote vaccines, which, again, are free and life-saving and keeping 99% of those who catch COVID out of the hospital. And I don't know if a memo or some edict was sent down from the Heritage Foundation overlords, but suddenly we started getting messaging like this from Mitch McConnell.
97% of the hospitalizations in the country for COVID are unvaccinated people. It never occurred to me after 3 highly effective vaccines were developed in under a year that we'd have difficulty getting Americans to take the shots. But that's obviously where we are. I want to underscore in the strongest possible manner I can, and I say this with some authority, as you all know, as a result of being a polio victim myself and being very aware that it took 7 decades to come up with 2 effective polio vaccines. This was done in under 1 year. These shots need to get in everybody's arm as rapidly as possible, or we're going to be back in a situation in the fall that we don't yearn for, that we went through last year.
We got this from Kayleigh McEnany, who, of course, couched her message in a way that would grovel at Trump's feet.
And if you get the vaccine, it reduces your chances of hospitalization in the event you contract COVID. So important, 95% reduction in hospitalizations for those over 65 for elderly. I'm vaccinated, encourage everyone to do so. It's the Trump vaccine. He got this vaccine with Operation Warp Speed. So wrong answer, Psaki, but everyone remember, Trump was at the helm of this vaccination.
We got this from Hannity.
Please take COVID seriously. I can't say it enough. Enough people have died. We don't need any more deaths. Research like crazy. Talk to your doctor, your doctors, medical professionals you trust based on your unique medical history, your current medical condition, and you and your doctor make a very important decision for your own safety. Take it seriously. You also have a right to medical privacy. Doctor-patient confidentiality is also important, and it absolutely makes sense for many Americans to get vaccinated. I believe in science. I believe in the science of vaccination.
And finally, this PSA that's been running on Fox.
We're in this together.
And if you can, get the vaccine.
For information on vaccine sites, visit the Vaccine Finder on the homepage of foxnews.com.
In total, Fox shows plugged vaccines.gov at least 7 times last week after going 6 straight weeks without even a single mention of the website. Like, the reversal was so obvious that even Biden pointed it out.
One of those other networks is not a big fan of mine. One you talk about a lot. But if you notice, as they say in the southern part of my state, they've had an altar call, some of those guys. All of a sudden, they're out there saying, let's get vaccinated. Let's get vaccinated. The very people before this were saying, I shouldn't make fun of it. That's good. It's good. It's good.
I mean, Even Biden acknowledging the right's reversal on vaccines really does underscore just how arbitrarily Fox and Republicans decide that something that was so bad is now suddenly good. Like, no deeply held positions based on adherence to facts or science, just blindly regurgitating whatever's on the teleprompter. Just the flip of a switch, and suddenly the thing that they were demonizing last week is great now. Everything is political, and as soon as the political winds shift, so do all of their talking points. And I don't think I have to explain how batshit crazy it is to approach public health that way. Now, even with some of these newfound revelations on the right, there were still some prominent voices who decided that unilaterally watching their own audience die wasn't quite enough to move the needle for them. And I think chief among them was, of course, Tucker Carlson, who not only didn't promote vaccines, but decided to tell millions of people that the COVID vaccine might kill them.
So the government keeps a database and has for decades on vaccine harm. It's called the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting Database, VAERS, and it tracks the side effects of vaccines, and there are side effects to all medicines. You're not allowed to read it, though, and if you do, people attack you. So we ignore it. That's why today almost no one noticed when the CDC updated the VAERS database, but we did notice it. So the question is not what the number is. We can debate that. The question is, are we as a country or the federal agencies, and is the news media making a good faith effort to find out what it is and then to care about what it is? Why wouldn't we care? If there were claims that Tylenol was causing people harm, we'd look into it. But news organizations aren't looking into it because there's an enormous amount of pressure just to ignore it. We're not following along, of course. Everyone else is.
And, of course, other clowns whose entire identity is predicated in ignorance. Marjorie Taylor Greene's out here tweeting, "Stop masking children," and that came in the same week that a 5-year-old child died of COVID in her own district. And yet when asked during an interview whether she feels responsibility for downplaying the effects of COVID on young people, this was her reaction.
Do you feel any responsibility for keeping people in Georgia safe? You know, there are children, skinny people who have died of the coronavirus. Do you feel any responsibility?
Tia, correct me up. You know what? I think people's responsibility is their own.
Yeah, hilarious, right? She was asked, do you feel any responsibility for promoting COVID misinformation, which she did by suggesting that only the elderly or overweight people are at risk, and then she laughs because apparently the word skinny was just too funny not to laugh at. And that was before effectively just suggesting that it's not her problem. The fact that the right has effectively ceded all of its messaging on COVID to people like that are why hospitals are full of Republicans dying of a now preventable disease. And that's the most dangerous part here, because let's just be honest, just having a few prominent voices on the right suddenly tell people that vaccines are good is likely not going to move the needle. Like, because Republicans decided to turn what should have been a public health issue into a culture war issue, being pro or anti-vax has basically become an element of your political identity now. And it's a hell of a lot harder to have someone just up and change their identity than it is to be open-minded about medical advice. Like, they've basically made it so that being anti-vax is this hardened, immovable position for a lot of people. And that'll mean that we're going to lose people who otherwise would have survived this. That's the consequence of this exhausting barrage of culture war grievance politics that the right traffics in. From wailing about the war on Christmas, to socialism, to critical race theory, to trans Americans, and on and on and on. So look, the point here is this. The fact that those sources on the right can just as quickly swing from don't get vaccinated to yes, you need to get vaccinated is a testament to the fact that they'll move wherever the wind blows them. This was never about science, it was about politics. It was about opposing Joe Biden because Joe wants you to get vaccinated, and so that means that Fox and Republicans don't. And the only reason that they're not still towing that line is because the optics of having their own supporters literally dying en masse as a result of this is really, really bad. And so knowing just how arbitrary all of this is, focus on the people who are actually qualified to speak on it. Not Tucker Carlson, not Marjorie Taylor Greene, not Kevin McCarthy, and definitely not the people who claim to hate COVID so much, who claim to hate lockdowns and mask mandates and stay-at-home orders, and yet refuse to follow any of the measures that would actually end this pandemic once and for all. So if you have friends or family or neighbors who are skeptical of the vaccine, even if you're not, comfortable discussing how incredibly safe it is, just point to the numbers. Virtually everyone getting hospitalized and dying are unvaccinated. In some cases, 97, 98, 99%. If anyone is worried about safety, it doesn't get clearer than that. Now, a couple notes here. I'm still raising money for the Texas Democrats who fled to Washington, D.C. to deprive Republicans of the quorum needed to pass their voter suppression bill. These Democrats are the one and only line of defense against this bill getting passed. So if you support what they're doing, please donate a few bucks. The link is in the post description of this video. Remember, these are state representatives who make $600 a month. They're not flush with cash, and these donations make a really, really big difference for people who are risking everything right now, who are living out of a suitcase in a hotel away from their families, all to protect our democracy. And finally, we are so close to reaching our halfway point goal of $450,000 for the Don't Be a Mitch Fund. So if you'd like to support voter registration and voter outreach groups in 9 key states ahead of the 2022 midterms, you can donate to that fund too. And the link is also in the post description. And again, doing this work now is what makes a difference, not just throwing cash at a super PAC in October of an election year. So please help support the people on the ground who are setting the stage for Democrats to flip some desperately needed seats in November of 2022. And finally, to listen to my interview with Congressman Eric Swalwell about his lawsuit against Trump, about the GOP's rejection of the January 6th committee, and his response to Kevin McCarthy, who opposed this committee while having bragged about the Benghazi Select Committee because it hurt Hillary Clinton, check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel.